Welcome to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Expert session for History, Archaeology and Classics. This session was hosted by our careers consultant Fiona Hartley, and she was joined by guests Abigail Miller, Research Impact Officer, Learning and Engagement Research Manager Adam Goldwater, and Keeper of Archaeology at the Great North Museum, Andrew Parkin. Without any further ado, we're going to hand over to Abby, who's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, her time at university, and her work as a Research Impact Officer.
Okay, fab. So, my name's Abby. I'm a Research Impact Officer at the University of Nottingham. I work in the Faculty of Sciences. I cover chemistry and physics at the moment. And I was Newcastle alumni. I graduated in 2016, started in 2013. And here is just a flavour of how I got to where I am now from graduation. And I can, of course, talk about my current role at the end, or if there's any questions that come up, please let me know. I just thought this would be interesting, I suppose. So, as you know, I graduated in 2016, and now I'm a Research Impact Officer. I got a first class degree in history, so it went really well. And I was a member of the History Society. I was president of History Society at Newcastle, and was sort of heavily involved in sporting societies as well, and had a really great time and made the most out of my time at university, I like to think. So while I was working at university, I actually worked at Dr. Martin's shoes. So I worked all the way through university, and a little bit after, just before I secured my next job. I then secured a scheme called Newcastle Work Experience. So I went to a local SME, so that's a small medium enterprise, so a small business, local business, on the northeast coast as marketing and communications officer for a bike and kayak shop. This was like half funded by the university and half funded by the company, and they were very keen to take me on. I interviewed for them, and it was one of the best summers ever, because I got to do some surfing, I got to do kayaking in the sea, and completely rejigged and created their marketing and comms strategy. And they actually won tourism event of the year that year as a result of my input. So it was really a rewarding experience, and everyone finds it an interesting bit of my CV when I talk about it. I then worked for Natural England as a civil service administrator. So this was a temporary job, but I stayed there for a year. And I was doing land grant management for farmers, and really used my communication skills from my job at Dr. Martin's as being a sales assistant, but also the kind of analytical skills from my degree. So that came in handy. I'm very much paying attention to detail and getting into the nitty-gritty analytics of things. And after that, I secured my next job on the Ambitious Futures Higher Education Graduate Programme. So this was a management programme, which meant that I had 3 different placements across different universities. So this was a graduate scheme. So I was very, very lucky to get onto the scheme and definitely use the benefit there. So that sort of kick-started my career in higher education. I definitely wouldn't have got onto the Ambitious Futures scheme without my degree from Newcastle, especially in a written subject, because again, it really gave me the skills and experience I required. I knew how the university sector worked from a student perspective, so it kind of gave me a very good platform to get onto the programme. And so my first placement was at the University of Nottingham International Student Recruitment Team. So these people fly out to different countries and recruit on behalf of Nottingham. So I went to UK-based recruitment fairs. I hired international student ambassadors. I knew how to talk to students from work, from being president of the History Society, and that was really good. My next placement was at Sheffield Hallam University in their teacher training department, and here I did lots of analytical work with student experience, and ran a student experience project which went on to inform the Department for Education method of recruiting students and retaining students in South Yorkshire. So again, that was really good, a really good opportunity. And my final placement was at the graduate school at the University of Nottingham again. So this was talking to lots of academics across the entire university and looking at the impact of an award given out by, well, awarded by the graduate school to students, PhD students, to receive half funding to go to conferences overseas. So this again was really good in boosting my experience of working with academics. So then I secured my current role. So you can kind of see how I've got there from my degree. But so as a research impact officer, again, I use my degree on a day-to-day basis. I work with very in-depth, detailed scientific information, research information, and translate that and relay that in lay people's terms to look at the impact. So I look at the impact of academic research. So you've done this piece of research, and then how has that impacted the wider society? And I'm heavily involved in collecting the evidence for that as well. So I ghostwrite letters of support on behalf of companies, send them off to major companies and to get them back and sort of liaise with them on what they're prepared to say in terms of impact or not. And that can be very, very rewarding. Again, it all comes down to the analytical skills. So that's really good. And also planning impact case studies. So I have to write these into 5-page documents. So again, being very concise, putting definitely the right wording in at the right time, and getting all of the relevant information in quite a short space of text. And I also liaise again with very, very senior professors across science. So again, those communication skills come in handy, and kind of influence them in putting these together. So that works really well. And I also lead on projects as well. So I've actually facilitated impact in a number of cases where I've seen a gap where maybe we could try contacting a different person who maybe other people haven't thought of, so a bit of critical thinking and analysis there, and also leading students to participate in public engagement and then recording the impact of that. So public engagement relating to science research, and then thinking how can we collect the relevant information to then say that this had an impact on the future, on the on the participants and what they know about science for the future. So yeah, so you can kind of see my journey here. But I thought that would, because I'm more of a recent graduate, I suppose, it would be a good way to showcase where I've come from and how I got here.
Thank you to Abby for that wonderful insight. We hope you found it useful. We now hand straight over to Adam Goldwater, Learning and Engagement Research Manager at the Great North Museum in Newcastle.
I bet not many people start their slides with some images of some Roman latrines, but there you go. This is kind of where my journey, both my interest in archaeology and my subsequent career, really stems from. So I'm lucky enough to live very close to Hadrian's Wall, and I was lucky enough to be given access to culture and heritage from a very young age. That dragged me up to Hadrian's Wall, kicking and screaming when I was younger, but it must have kind of absorbed into me because I became very interested in history, in heritage, in Romans, and particularly archaeology. And this kind of very unobtrusive structure, bottom left there, is the Roman toilets at the fort of Housesteads on Hadrian's Wall. And it was one of the sites that we used to visit quite regularly. And I think a lot of the public, it's a building, a structure, the remains capture the public imagination, particularly the kind of toilet humour and an interesting use of how the Romans actually used these structures. And I grew up with the image top right in our toilet at home. So for many years I shared our toilet with these Roman soldiers who just kind of became a familiar part of my my kind of background interest in archaeology. And yes, they've stayed with me for many years. And as I came to make choices around my GCSEs and subsequently my A levels, I decided I really wanted to actually study archaeology, that it wasn't just a kind of background interest. And my parents supported me in that choice up until just before my A levels. I was really interested in following law as a career, but I kind of woke up one morning and thought, no, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to stick to something I'm really interested in studying. So I applied to do archaeology at University of Nottingham, which is where Abby is now. And in 1997, I started my undergraduate degree in archaeology there, and had 3 fantastic years studying a whole range of archaeology from the origins of human evolution right through to medieval history and archaeology. But it was Roman archaeology that kind of stayed with me, and I stayed on at Nottingham. I worked part-time in Waterstones in Bridlesmith Gate, which I think is still there. Abby might know it very well. So I did a part-time master's in Roman archaeology and worked in Nottingham as well. And whilst I was there, I should also say that part of the reason why I kind of became very immersed in archaeology and the interest in archaeology was a program on at the time, which probably the youngest participants in this program won't be familiar with. But Time Team really brought archaeology to a really popular audience, and I think I would probably be laughed out of the room if I'd said at Nottingham why I study archaeology was because I was inspired by Time Team. But actually, it did a real service to bring archaeology to the masses, albeit some of its archaeological techniques were probably quite dubious at the time. But that was part of that kind of picture of how you engage a broader public in a subject, and that kind of stayed with me, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So whilst studying my master's at Nottingham, I was lucky enough to receive a scholarship to study at the British School at Rome. And I was there for a few months studying the archaeology of the ancient city. And I think it's whilst I was there that what struck me about what I was particularly interested in archaeology wasn't the actual physical digging up or uncovering of the remains, but it was how those remains are interpreted to the broader public, or not, as my experience in Rome taught me. And what I became really quite fascinated by was how we in archaeology do a disservice to the public, to visitors, by not really putting enough investment or time into communicating what it is people are actually looking at. And if I refer to my original slides of the Roman latrines, also how those interpretations differ, and actually how that could be really interesting to the public, that as archaeologists we don't always know what the remains you're looking at looked like. And I often refer to the analogy that archaeology is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but with 99% of the pieces missing and no picture on the box. And for me, that's really exciting, that you can present this to the public as to encourage a kind of broader interest in the subject. So I came back from Rome really fired up, and I found a course back in my home city, Newcastle. I came home and I studied a master's in heritage education and interpretation, and from there I was able to really investigate what was on our doorstep. We're very lucky up here in the northeast. We have some real jewels in terms of heritage and archaeology, not least some sites with reconstructions for the public. And I spent a happy summer in 2002 giving guided tours to the public as part of a placement on the programme I was studying at our Bay Roman Fort, and engaging directly with the public, which was something that I was beginning to get really interested in doing. And following that, I was lucky enough to get a job at Tyneway Archives and Museums in the learning and education team. And between 2003 and 2015, worked at a range of different heritage museum and gallery sites right across the northeast. So I've worked across all of the Tyneway Archives and Museums, working with schools and families, from Monk Wearmouth and Sunderland museums through to the Shipley Art Gallery, Discovery Museum, the Stevenson Railway Museum, the Lang Art Gallery and the Shipley Art Gallery, including roles that have given me a broader regional remit to work with museums right across the northeast, from Alnwick to Zetland, as I like to say. And from 2015, I took up a role at the Great North Museum, Hancock. So the Hancock Museum being the university museum, and being a museum that was very close to my heart. Growing up in Newcastle was one of those places my dad dragged me to, and the museum itself holds a lot of kind of folk memory in the city, and lots of people hold it in very high regard. So I feel very lucky and actually quite privileged to work at the museum, working with such a range of audiences. And so we when we're talking about archaeology, we're often looking at remains and material culture, but for me it's the people that bring it alive, and our visitors. So at the moment at the museum we have this really broad range of visitors, from babies right through to older people, and it really excites me to be able to, as part of my role, engage the public in culture and heritage and science. And Abby referred to part of her work of bringing science to a broader audience. So here at the museum, we are working with academics right across the faculties at Newcastle University, and bringing their scientific research or broader academic research, and trying to use the museum as a platform to bring that research to a much broader public. And so that's kind of core to my role, and something I that gets me out of bed in the morning, I suppose, is you'll see from these images that we're working with very young children, and I refer to these visitors as our 22nd century visitors. So the museum has opened its doors to the public since the 19th century, the 1850s and 1880s, and we're just stewards of this stuff. And Andrew will talk a little bit more about the collections he works with, but hopefully the museum will always be here, and what we're trying to do is inspire that next generation, so the cycle continues. And the babies and the pre-crawlers and the crawlers and the toddlers that we work with today will hopefully be bringing their grandparents back into the next century, and so long may it continue, and hopefully that next generation is inspired in the same way that I was when my parents took me to museums, cultural sites. So in a very, very roundabout way, that's the journey I've been on.
Thank you to Adam for that. It was really useful and insightful, and we hope you found it helpful. We now pass over to Andrew Parkin, who is the current Keeper of Archaeology at the Great North Museum, to tell us a little bit more about his career and how he ended up in this position.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm Keeper of Archaeology at the Great North Museum, Hancock, and here it is. So I'm responsible for all of the archaeology collections within the building. I manage a very small team. So there are 3 of us who work with the archaeology collections, and I'm just going to say a little bit about my background, how I got into being a Keeper of Archaeology, and then maybe just say a tiny bit as well about my job and the sorts of things I do, and how the skills I gained at university help with my work. So, like Adam, I had an interest in history as a child. It was my favourite subject at school, and I was always pestering my parents. I liked visiting sites, I liked visiting museums, and really, when I was looking at a university degree to do, I wanted to carry on working with history, because I was good at it and enjoyed it. But I chose archaeology because I was interested also in doing something that was based outdoors, something that involved some practical skills as well. And archaeology, as I'm sure you're all aware, is very hands-on, lots of opportunities for excavation, other kinds of field work. This is something that really appealed to me. So my first degree was actually a joint honours degree. It was ancient history and archaeology, and I studied at Newcastle University, and spent 3 really enjoyable years doing the archaeology. I then went on to specialise. I took an MLit in Greek archaeology, which is a particular interest and passion of mine, and spent a year working on the archaeology of the city of Athens. And like Adam, I was lucky enough to spend time at the British School at Athens on one of their summer study courses, and got to really know a lot about the archaeology of Greece during my time there. While I was doing my MLit, I actually worked as a volunteer for the university's Greek collection, which was at the time housed on the university campus in Newcastle still. So I developed programs for local schools. It was, and we're talking about the early 90s here. It was a time when schools were starting to teach the ancient Greeks as part of the national curriculum, and they were looking for resources to do this. And I was able to help organise school programs around the ancient Greeks. That voluntary work actually led to some paid work. Once I'd completed my MLit, I had a series of short-term contracts working with the Greek collection and helping develop that as a learning resource. Those contracts eventually ran out, and I went on to train as a secondary history teacher. So I did a PGCE in history and actually spent a little time teaching history in schools. That didn't last very long though, because there was a museum education job at Newcastle University, which I applied for. And I think my previous experience had probably helped in gaining that job. And I came back to Newcastle University to work as an education specialist, not just with the Greek collection in the university, but also with the Museum of Antiquities, which is the other archaeological collection connected with Newcastle University. It's the collection of the Society of Antiquaries of Newcastle upon Tyne. So I spent quite a long time working with those collections, and over the years I began to do more and more curatorial work, and my role sort of gradually began to drift into curatorial work. And when the Great North Museum opened in 2009, I was actually appointed as Keeper of Archaeology there. So gradually I've moved from sort of being an education specialist to being more of a curatorial specialist, someone who cares for collections, looks after collections. So I've kind of moved in the opposite direction to Adam, I think, in a way. As he's done more learning work, I've done less, although I still am very interested in museum education. So in the museum, I'm responsible for all the archaeology galleries. So I have overall sort of responsibility for the care of the objects in those galleries, and also how the archaeology is interpreted, the way it's labelled, the sorts of stories we tell. And that covers a really broad range of archaeology. So we have British prehistory, we have Roman archaeology, we have the ancient Greeks, we have Egyptology, we have the Anglo-Saxons, and also we have world cultures collections that have been acquired more recently from various different parts of the world. So it's a very, very broad remit. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about my job, is that no day is ever the same. And I'm certainly not stuck in one particular period. And here, I could have shown thousands and thousands of objects. Just three I picked out randomly. A Bronze Age spear from Britain, a Campanian fish plate. This is from southern Italy, from one of the Greek colonies there. I love this object, which is why I picked it. And also an Egyptian shabti, one of these figures that the dead took with them into their tomb, and these could be reanimated and serve you in the afterlife. So just a really, really tiny cross-section of the sorts of things I get to work with. And that's one of the joys of my job, is working with such amazing collections.
Andrew, which is your favourite collection? That's just been a question asked.
I shouldn't really show favouritism, but it has to be the Greek collection, because that's the one I've got the longest working relationship with. And I also knew the founder of that collection, a man called Brian Shefton, really well. So I have, and it's unhealthy, but curators have this. We become attached to our collections.
Yeah.
We become possessive. it's a really bad thing to be admitting in front of Adam, but I guess it's part of that curatorial mindset. So it would have to be the Greeks. So, I mean, one of the things I guess I really like about my job is the opportunities to work with temporary exhibitions, pull together exhibitions that we may be borrowing objects from other museums. We might be telling very specific stories, and that allows me to be quite creative in what I'm doing, to think about the audiences I'm talking to. Gertrude Bell was one example, the early 20th century explorer and politician who had a role in the foundation of Iraq, and that's on the slide here. I also did an exhibition around Lindo Man, which is an Iron Age bog body from Lindo Moss in Cheshire that's usually in the British Museum, but they actually loaned it to the Great North Museum. So that was another one I really enjoyed working on. And you're continually learning, encountering new material and thinking about new things, and that's just such a pleasure. And the other thing I really enjoy is talking to people about the collections, particularly if we can get them to handle objects, come up closely to the collections, look at things, and that goes right across the board. School children, university students, adult learners, any interest groups. And again, this is something that keeps me on my toes. I mean, school children ask the best questions. You have to really think about it. And I think that relationship with the museum audience is really, really important for me as well. And the other thing I love is the opportunities I get to go places, meet people. I get to visit other museums, talk to colleagues there. I visit as many archaeological sites as I can, and my work has taken me to all sorts of different places. So there's a photograph of me with some Iraqi friends and colleagues in the National Museum in Baghdad, which was a fantastic experience that's related to my work. And because I love Greece so much, there's the Parthenon there. And Greece is a place I like to get back to as much as I possibly can. So I think my career trajectory is not a particularly well planned one. It's not necessarily a conventional one. I haven't got a museum studies qualification, but I have got archaeology and teaching qualifications. And I think all the skills I gained from my archaeology degree have obviously fed into my work. I haven't moved very far from my original degree, but I think some of the other things, the communication skills, the start of building up networks when you're at university studying, have all been really important for my job. So that's a quick overview of what I do and how I got there.
We now move into the Q&A portion of this session, where Fiona will be leading our guests in a few questions that have been submitted by students who tuned into the session live. She'll also be asking a few questions that were submitted prior to these talks from you, the partner students.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions in relation to, you are our one speaker who's most recently graduated, so I just want to focus a little bit on your experiences as a student. You got involved in a wealth of kind of extracurricular activities. What would you say was the most valuable takeaway experience from your time at university that really helped prepare you for your career?
So with a career in higher education, it's really beneficial to understand how students work and what sort of motivates them. So being present in History Society, you know, I'd worked with motivating voluntary students as part of the society to come together and do some really cool projects. So, you know, I organised a trip to Berlin, I organised a trip to Budapest. You know, so those kind of that level of responsibility from a student in particular really sort of sets you up for good organisational roles in the future, and that you can really talk about, and people do like sort of recognise outside, you know, in a professional setting. So saying, you know, in my second year of university, I organised a trip of 35 people to Berlin on my own. You know, you're organising flights there, you're bringing people with you, you're doing risk assessments. You know, there's lots of transferable skills there that I think you know, you might not particularly realise you're doing while you're a student. So my advice would be to get involved in all sorts of things, really. Yeah, so I think the History Society really helped me there. But also in regards to my studies, it would be talking to the professors and talking to the academics and really understanding what they think makes a good essay. So that's, you know, kind of on the academic side of things, because their opinions really do differ. So you know, if you actually have if you can, go and have a conversation with them and basically get to know them a bit and see how they think, you know, an ideal essay could be structured, or if they've got any interesting projects you could write about. Yeah, I was very privileged to actually go to London and do a lot of my primary resource research in the summer before my third year. So I was very organised in my dissertation. So I actually got a lot of it together. I think this is quite unusual, I don't know, to write it quite early, which then opened my third year to thinking about getting opportunities for career development in terms of like placements. You can see here I work for the Bike and Kayak Shop, but I also secured a few internships with universities as well, and it just gave me a little bit less of the stress in third year, knowing that I'd got a lot of what I needed, the physical research in my back pocket.
Yeah, and obviously you were doing so many things. I mean, what would you, in terms of advice to students about the planning and organising your time so you don't feel too pressured at pinch points like assessment periods? Did you have any tactics for planning and organising your time?
Yeah, I definitely did. So I actually live with biomedical students, so that was their course. So they they were in labs for 9 till 5 every day. So I didn't do 9 till 5, but I definitely set aside a lot of time in the library. So physically getting out of the house, I know now people have to work from home a bit more, but you know, going into the library and kind of having a separate place to work to where you sleep is really helpful. So I kind of set designated times where I could go and research and talk to people. So I think that was really helpful. Yeah, definitely. And also with my dissertation, I made a skeleton plan of primary and secondary sources, you know, in a big table of what was exactly going to go where. So it's probably quite a mathematical way of thinking about things, but just as an idea of distribution of sources and yeah, like what would fit where most. But again, I kind of gave myself enough time to be able to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking really about the challenges that you anticipate the museum and the heritage sector will face over the kind of coming years, and what that might mean for anybody that's thinking about forging a career in the future in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, our collections are our unique selling point. You know, they are the real thing, and what's important in our learning and education and public engagement programs is actually that kind of physicality of the stuff we hold. And for our learning programs, what we really try to promote is this sense of kinesthetic learning, that you're engaging with the real thing. We provide as many opportunities to handle objects as possible, but I think as we move into the future, and certainly this kind of post COVID world we live in, we have to look at blended opportunities. So how we can embrace digital technologies and how we can bring that into the mix. So actually you're providing as much access as possible for people who can't necessarily physically access the space of the museum or come and see the collections themselves. So it's always been a challenge for us. It's always been there, how we can make best use of the resources we have and provide kind of digital access. But I think that'll become even more important into the future, and it's something that the museum and heritage sector has often been very slow to adapt to. So I think the challenge for us is how we can be much more flexible, adaptable, and agile actually into the future. And I think all the skills that you learn, at university, can help, refresh the workforce, as it were, and bring that kind of new insight into how we use collections, how we bring those to a much broader and accessible and representative audience, actually, so that people bring and share and contribute new stories to the collections we hold.
Yeah, thank you. Adam, I have a quick one actually. I mean, of your peer group when you were doing your undergraduate programme, what kind of range of careers did your peer group go into?
Yeah, good question. So interestingly, it's 20 years to the day since we graduated at Nottingham, and we had a bit of a Zoom gathering last night.
Right.
And actually, quite a few of us, I'd say about 70% of us, have gone into an archaeology or museum or heritage related career.
Right.
There are a fair few working in quite senior positions in units. So a couple of people working in Cotswold Archaeology, Oxford unit. I know a couple of people who are researchers at the British Museum. And one of my peers, actually, Polly Bentz, worked with Andrew around some of our ethnographic collections. So kind of our paths have met again as our careers have gone on. And a few other people have gone into teaching, so both school, primary, secondary, and higher education. So there are people who've gone into related fields, and a few of us in museums.
Okay, great, thank you, Adam. We've got a couple of questions actually. I know there's one for Abby, but one also for you, Andrew. You mentioned that your postgraduate qualification was an MLit.
Yeah.
Could you just say just a little bit about what an MLit is and how it's different from maybe other taught masters programs?
I think what an MLit is now is probably different to what an MLit was in the early 90s. It was a 1-year research degree, and I didn't have any teaching. I basically went and researched and wrote a dissertation. Well, wrote a thesis for the MLit. So it's quite different to an MA, where you might have taught elements alongside writing a thesis at the end. So it was just purely a research degree.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And then there's another question to Abby, just to say a little bit about your dissertation. I wonder if you're able just to do that for us now, Abby. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So I was really interested in gender history, modern gender history, well, all gender history, and I was looking into German memory for one of my third-year modules preemptively. So I basically did it on gender and gender politics in 1970s East Germany. So that's while the Berlin Wall was still up, so communist Germany. And so I went to a collection. I identified a collection in London which would be really useful. It was the women's room at LSE. So while you're at university, you can use other universities' libraries if you sign up to a certain service. So I went into their library, used their collection and primary sources collection, and it was loads of translations of British journalists who had gone over to East Germany and recorded the situation of women at the time. So my dissertation was on those primary sources basically, and looking into what the British thought of East Germany at the time in regards to gender, if that makes sense. quite a niche topic, as most dissertations are, but it was really, really interesting, and I really enjoyed doing that piece of work.
Well, whilst we've got you on camera, I mean, just thinking about your current role, what, in terms of your prior experiences, what would you say was the most critical experience that you had that helped to inform your decision to work as a research impact officer?
So I think I also love working with people. This is working with a lot of people who are scientists. They're traditionally hard to work with. So yeah, it's definitely working with a very wide range of people. The university sector is really broad in terms of opportunities as well. So for International Women's Day, again, gender history, I created an exhibition for them, which was a joint enterprise between the University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent University, showcasing women through the years who were inspirational to the universities and Nottingham as a city. So Ada Lovelace, who did early computer programming. So yeah, I could really get into that. Got to know their archives team, you know. So because it is so broad, I knew that I wanted to work for university because it's very collegiate. But in terms of just bringing back round to the question, I think it's really my attention to detail. So my analytical skills, my attention to detail, really getting to the point and seeing the niche, but also the big picture. So, for example, with impact, you know, I could talk to a professor about MRI, so you know, this scanning, brain scans, etc. And you know, I could say, okay, so you think this is an impact, but have you spoken? You've done a bit of work with this company. Have you spoken to them? And then they'll say, oh no, I haven't got time for that. So then I will go and liaise with the company, build up a rapport, get the correct information, ask the right questions. Write everything down and go back to them and say, this is the discussion that we had over the phone, are you happy to put this in writing for this purpose? So you know, it's a lot of liaising with people, getting the niche details within a big picture. There's also a lot of following policy. So the funding body that I support the application for is called REF, which is basically a benchmarking system for higher education institutions in terms of funding from the government, and they have very strict guidelines on what you can and can't submit, what impact is, types of impact, how to record things. So all of the nitty-gritty details that you find, say, in a dissertation in terms of referencing, you know, like that I have to reference in this work in a completely different style, but I'm still having to make sure that every dot is in the right place, every comma is in the right place, and it all adheres to policy. So that is another area that maybe beyond this job, once the REF has been submitted, I could go into, because, you know, I'm adhering to very strict guidelines. And I suppose in, you know, during my degree, you know, you've got a style guide for pieces of work, you know, and if you're talking to people and trying to work out what the best essay would look like, or what the real standard of work is required for those higher grades. So, you know, there are overlaps there as well.
So you nicely talked about the skills that you use and how you develop those over time whilst at university. I'll just come back to Andrew, because you work with a small team and you're involved perhaps with their recruitment. Are there particular qualities and attributes that you see are important that helps to make students and graduates hireable, or yeah, that's such a word, hireable?
Yeah, I think being a curator is very different now to the way it used to be. It used to be seen as a very backroom kind of a job. You'd tuck yourself away with your collections. You'd spend your days cataloguing, documenting collections. Whereas now I think you have to be a much more user-friendly sort of a person. So I'd really be seeing someone who can communicate an enthusiasm for those collections as something that's really, really important. Good organisational skills, crucial as well. Adam's probably going to laugh because my organisational skills are not that great, which is why I need people around me who've got really good organisational skills. But And obviously a passion and enthusiasm for the subject. Getting jobs in the museum world is highly competitive, and I think you have to have things that set you apart from your peers if you're going to be working in this sector. So
okay, my last final question, just maybe a sentence from you each. What would your advice be to our current students, prospective students, about how they should make the most of their time whilst at university that will help them advance their choices on completion of their studies? What would be your kind of one top piece of advice? So I'll start with Abby.
Yeah, okay, so mine would be get involved in society work, I suppose, and extracurricular activities, especially if you have the time. Contact hours for history seem to be, well, are a little bit lower and than other subjects. And although you definitely balance that time, the time spent with library work and thinking about the subject that you're doing and writing, also think how you can get involved in other things to just bolster the CV. Lots of my colleagues work in, I know colleagues, and fellow alumni who work for HMRC, they're lawyers, they do all sorts of things, and they have got a lot of the experiences that then got them a later job during their degree with extracurricular time.
Brilliant. Adam, your piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, I think, if you wanted to go down a career in museum and heritage, it is extremely competitive. And I see so many applications of people who, might have the academic background, but actually what sets people apart is that string to their bow. Any volunteering experience, if you're able to do it, not everyone is in a position where they can do it, but if you can, do as much as possible, because that will really set you apart. And just give you that added breadth of experience.
Great, brilliant. And then Andrew?
I think both Abby and Adam's advice is exactly what I'd say. Get involved, make the most of your opportunities while you're at university. And I think do things that you love as well. I think that's really important. I'm motivated because I'm doing something I really, really enjoy. And I was for my degree, and seeing people who were doing degrees where they thought there was a high paid job at the end, but they didn't enjoy the work, and seeing them struggle makes me think you've got to really find something that suits you and you're going to be enthusiastic about.
Yeah, that's a really lovely piece of advice from all three of you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind of contributions.
Thank you for tuning in to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Expert session. We hope you found the discussion and the presentations from our guests useful and insightful. Remember to stay up to date with further advice from alumni and industry professionals. Subscribe to our Newcastle University Career Service YouTube channel, and you can follow us on our social media channels at NCL Careers on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We hope to see you in September. Good luck and take care.